You look so good, fantastic man.
Peace, everyone. Uh, Welcome, friends, family, comrades, to the space. Sure, yeah. Welcome to the space. Today we're here to uplift this space to talk more about our histories, talk about the protracted struggle in the current moment, and then also visions and strategies for moving forward for us to win. I'm Geechee Ya. I'm a community organizer with Community Movement Builders, CMB, some of y'all know, here in Atlanta, specifically in the Pittsburgh neighborhood. And I'm excited to be here as we dive into Atlanta's history and legacy of collective building and our ongoing fight for liberation. Um, in this city that's dubbed Black Mecca, those of us who are more sober know that Atlanta's history is deeply tied to ecocide via capitalism and white pathology. The city was first built by the erasure of indigenous people and the Mayafa performed on African people, and also the exacerbating exploitation of working people. But Atlanta is also the city where our people have always fought back, from the washerwoman strike in 1880s to the Black Panther Party seriously contending for power, to coalitions against Cop City, and also us building cooperatives today. The city also displays to us what is possible if we come together to resist oppression and build a world that is actually livable. Today's conversation is a prelude to the Resist and Build Summit that's happening on May 2nd through 5th this year, right here in Atlanta. CMB is one of the Atlanta-based organizations on the host circle for the summit. And we're excited to, again, create this space where we can gather in person, strategize, and take action towards deep social and systematic transformation. But today, on this virtual space, we're here to learn about the past, reflect on the present, strategize to build a united front to ensure our future. But as this conversation unfolds, please feel free to share in the comments questions or comments or thoughts, and we'll pull those up towards the end of the panel and discuss them more broadly. I am honored and excited to see my good sister again, and we're welcome to have Dr. Jessica Gordon Nembhard, who's a renowned scholar, author, and advocate for a solidarity economy. Her work illuminated how African people and working class communities have consistently used collective action to resist oppression and build cooperative alternatives. Her work reminds us that we don't have to accept the way the system is that exploits us. We can create new ones, systems that are rooted in care, solidarity, and justice. She'll guide us through envisioning Atlanta's pivotal role in this history and help us draw lessons for today's movement to resist and build. Also, joining us in this conversation later on is three Atlanta organizers. You have Ayinde Summers from Project South, Eric Lamar from West Georgia Farmers Cooperative, and Allison Johnson from the Housing Justice League. But first, let's welcome our sister, Dr. Jessica Gordon Nembhard, up to the stage with me.
Thank you so much. It's such a privilege to be here and to be involved in this, and wishing you the best of luck. I know it's going to be a great conference in May, and sorry I can't be there, but I'm so happy that I can help us usher it in. You already sort of did an acknowledgement to the original stewards of the land here on U.S. soil, but I want to remind us of that, remind us that we need to honor treaties and recognize that Indigenous peoples are still here. Also, I want to acknowledge all of our ancestors, in particular the African origins of humanity. And we need to honor Mother Earth as well. I also always like to acknowledge the struggles of enslaved laborers, all those who continue to labor without just compensation, those who are combating settler colonialism, anti-Blackness, racial capitalism, heteropatriarchy, and acknowledge our claim to land and resources and our history of resistance, which is what we're raising today, our history of using mutual aid, cooperative, solidarity, economics for liberation. So thanks again for having me.
Well, thank you for
I
being here.
want to talk about what resist and build means and what I've been learning over the years through my research, and then have a great dialogue with local Atlanta activists. So resist and build means not just reacting against, but being proactive and deliberate about creating justice and about engaging not just in reforms, but in non-reformist reforms that are going to lead us to transformative change and liberation. In my studies of the Black co-op movement in the US, I found many examples of resisting and building, not just resisting. We know that economic inequality and exploitation actually engender resistance. We know that human beings practice economic solidarity and cooperative economics throughout our history. Actually, human beings, oh, sorry. I just saw a note. Sorry. Okay, I'm back. We know that human beings, actually humanity's earliest form of economics, and the way we've survived through the centuries has been through economic cooperation, solidarity economics, practicing collective survival. Cooperative economies were our first economic systems. We created caring communities, shared the risks and the profits through mutual aid, barter, solidarity, and cooperative economics. We know that competition is not actually natural, it's harmful, and it's not the right way for human beings to exist, but we've been stuck in this model for about 4 centuries now. We know that cooperation is more efficient and productive. There was a study done in Atlanta at Emory University in the early 2000s that found that people who cooperated got endorphins, and the more they cooperated, the longer the endorphins lasted. We know that additional studies have also found the same thing. So of course we cooperate, since it actually brings us joy and some happiness, right? And we need to remember that too, because sometimes we see even collective action as being a little onerous, but it's really it's really how human beings remain human beings and keep ourselves going. I also found through my research that the strongest and most successful co-ops were those that had strong connections to their communities. They were often started by Black organizations or by members of Black organizations. They were rigorously supported by the surrounding community in multiple ways. And so again, this collective action, this building and resisting together, is what makes what we do successful and long-lasting. There's a wonderful quote by W.E.B. Du Bois, who I think you all know, early Black intellectual. I think he was the first Black PhD at Harvard, also the founder of urban sociology, but also a proponent of cooperatives. There's a quote that I don't often use from him that really I think is good for today, to remind us of today. And that is, he said, and actually I believe he said this in 1907 in Atlanta, when he was having his conference on Negro businesses and economic cooperation in 1907. And he said, in the spirit of revolt, which tried to cooperate by means of insurrection, that led to widespread organization for the rescue of fugitive slaves among Negroes themselves, and then developed into various cooperative efforts toward economic emancipation and land buying. So he says, gradually, these efforts led to cooperative business, building and loan associations, and trade unions. So what does that mean? He's saying that in order to revolt, African peoples had to recognize the need to cooperate in order to achieve their goals. And this was cooperation and actually organizing the revolts, But that cooperation, right, to be free and the physical free, right, that led us to see that we could and should also organize for other kinds of freedom, not just freedom from enslavement, but and through we used the Underground Railroad, and that was another whole solidarity cooperative system to get us from enslavement to freedom. But also we needed freedom from economic exploitation. And so again, you organizing cooperatively, collective work and responsibility so that we could actually achieve economic emancipation. So for Du Bois, the Black co-op ownership started actually from our efforts to liberate ourselves. And so from resistance to revolt to organization to cooperation to economic emancipation. And so again, this resist and build is so meaningful when we look at, when we can understand our history from that perspective. One of the best and easiest examples of resist and build is to look at the Black Panther Party in the 1960s, late 1960s and early 70s, right? It started out as an organization for self-defense against police brutality. But the Panthers early on realized that they also needed to defend against state violence and economic violence. And so they engaged in community-controlled economic development, not just using mutual aid, but actually collective survival programs that they called survival programs pending revolution. They argued the need for radical restructuring of our society to eliminate racism and exploitation. They knew that systems needed to be changed at the same time that people's and communities' immediate needs needed to be met. So they developed programs that reflected the world they wanted to build. Free breakfast for Black children while also teaching them about our own history, about African American history, developing their sense of pride and purpose. They also did free health clinics because they believed everyone deserved health care, proper health care. They had sickle cell anemia research projects going on. They also developed co-op businesses that address the immediate needs, but also help to prepare us to engage in systemic change, to learn how to make decisions together, run cooperative businesses, right? So not just to provide co-op bakeries so that we could have food, not just co-op food shoe factories, not just co-op pest control companies to address the pest control issues, not just the co-op newspaper, not just co-op transportation services, right? So one, we're getting at the needs that we had immediately, but we're also learning how to be human beings in our economic systems and how to work together, own together, share what the profits were, and make sure that our businesses were doing the things that our community needed. So while addressing community needs, we were developing the enterprises that were going to be governed collectively, sharing resources, reducing our reliance on the exploitative and racist businesses. And so again, this notion that we could resist and build at the same time and build toward a better future in ways that would help us become better, stronger human beings and create better, stronger human systems to address our human needs. Let me go back to the 1880s, because that's also a really interesting time. For Atlanta, you had the phenomenal washerwomen's strike in 1881. But also that whole decade of the 1880s was a fascinating period of organizing after Reconstruction was ended by the federal government in 1876. So in the 1880s, it's a really interesting period of time because it's actually one of the most repressive periods of US history. It's a backlash period very similar to what we're in right now with the Trump administration. So trying to undo all that was done during Reconstruction, all the racial justice progress, and even some economic progress that happened after the Civil War and during Reconstruction. But progressive peoples didn't sit down and just let things happen and be victims. They took charge. And in the 1880s, it's actually a fascinating period. It's both the growth and the start of the Jim Crow American apartheid. It's also the start of the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, and white supremacist violence and terrorism against Black folks, and the repeal of so many progressive laws and things. But we also had this amazing coalition of labor, populist, women's rights, civil rights, and co-op advocates during this period. One example is the Knights of Labor, which was a labor union, but it was also a populist party, a civil rights organization that believed in integration at a time when the country was becoming more and more segregated again, women's rights, and they were developing co-ops, especially worker co-ops, because they understood that workers needed to own their own work and own their own companies. One example of the Knights of Labor's progress was in Richmond, Virginia, in the late 1880s. They actually ran a political campaign, started a political party, ran a political campaign to take over the city council because the old city council had vowed that they were going to rebuild Richmond City Hall with convict labor. And the labor unions didn't want that. So the Knights of Labor mounted this citywide campaign, black and white, even though at that time segregation had set in and the black chapters of the Knights of Labor could not be in the same room with the white chapters. And I know I'm just about out of time, so I just want to finish this example and have one other one, and then we'll start talking to our local people. But anyway, so in Richmond, the black and white chapters couldn't even meet in the same room, but they coordinated a campaign and won the majority of the city council positions and were able, instead of hiring convict labor to build the new city hall in Richmond, they actually hired unionized black and white co-ed labor. And also some of those Knights of Labor groups had construction co-ops that were hired to build the city hall. So another example, again, resist and build, resisting the things that were wrong, but building the coalitions, the movements, and the organizations to make sure things were done right, even again under the most repressive time in our history. And even though Knights of Labor members had to operate underground, the black and the white members had to meet secretly because they couldn't meet in public together, all that kind of thing, but they still were able to do this phenomenal campaign and get real change made. Also in the 1930s, during the Great Depression, we have the Young Negroes Cooperative League, another example of resist and build. In this case, the founders, George Schuyler and Ella Jo Baker, were talking to young Black folks about how they need to save the race with economic cooperation, that they need to start creating co-ops, creating local co-op societies that connected with the National Young Negroes Cooperative League to teach about cooperative economics and to help to start credit unions, co-op groceries, worker co-ops, etc. Because again, looking at racial capitalism and what was happening in the Depression, if we didn't again organize ourselves, cooperate, collectively own and run our own businesses and things, then Black folks wouldn't make it. And that it was up to young people to kind of take that in hand and to do it. They had a beautiful vision of starting, a forum in each community where there are 5 or more members who were starting, to learn together and to start some kind of co-op. Then you would start a wholesale establishment in each state to connect with all the local co-ops and the enterprises they were starting. Then there'd be a co-op credit union, a co-op bank, or a credit union, regional, to help all the co-ops that they start. And then you'd have factories, regional factories, co-op factories that would provide all the supplies to the different co-ops in the local areas. And so you'd end up with a whole co-op commonwealth. And so again, this notion of organizing towards something that was building, addressing the immediate needs, but building the world that we want to build. So back to Atlanta, let me just finish with a quote from John Lewis, and then I'd be happy to introduce the panel to you. In his autobiography, the late, great, Honorable John Lewis actually talked about his early work in the 70s with SNCC and other groups as a co-op developer in the South. And what he said was people could vote, but they did not have enough to eat. My job was about helping those people join together, helping them one another to fill those needs. It was about showing people how to pool what money they had to form a bank or their own credit union or band together to buy groceries, seed, or feed. And so he talked about this connection, right? So we did finally win our voting rights, but we were still starving. People were still in poverty. So getting voting rights, achieving some civil rights was not enough for racial justice. We had to have economic justice as well. Du Bois said that, Fannie Lou Hamer said that, the Black Panther Party said that, the Movement for Black Lives is saying that, the people you're about to meet now are all saying that, right? Racial justice needs economic justice, and both require organizing commitment and cooperation. So now let's hear from people in Atlanta who are doing this resisting and building as we speak.
So really quickly, let me apologize. Our team, we made a little blunder with correcting the names, but it's important that we get the names right. So Eric Simpson, and we also have Ayinde Summers, but we will be joined by those two and Allison Johnson to have the panel conversation. So they'll be up on the screen, and I will remove my face.
Great, thanks so much for that. So I think my first question is for Ayinde. I hope I can call you that. Project South has been deeply involved. I just lost electricity, I think.
We still hear you and see you.
I'm
Yeah,
still
we can
good?
hear you though.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. I think I'll be okay since I've got a battery on my laptop. Okay, sorry about that. So Project South has been deeply involved in movement building in Atlanta and the broader South. Can you share how some of Atlanta's history of resistance while building our own alternatives has influenced your work today? And what strategies from the past do you see most relevant in this movement, particularly as we work to dismantle capitalism and build alternatives? And I'm going to go off camera for a second while we listen to that answer. I'll be right back.
No problem. Yeah, our Project South is actually gratefully we actually are on the campus of the original Atlanta University campus, where Du Bois, John Hope, Virginia Hope were walking around the grounds there and coming up with some of these social resistance initiatives. And so we lean into quite a bit of history as we continue to work and educate community about what was going on in those days of Black Reconstruction, and then also looking at what we can do moving forward to win the minds of our people as we continue to liberate ourselves in this journey. And so that's, again, Brownsville is what the original name was for the Atlanta University, where Atlanta University, well, I don't know, some of you all may be familiar with Atlanta, but where University Avenue is, there's an exit there on 85, 75, 85 coming up. So many of us didn't know that the reason why it's called University Avenue is because that's where Atlanta University was. And so that's we're behind Carver High School. Yeah, so we're literally, our building, our physical building is literally rooted in politics, in resistance. And so that has a lot to do with a lot of the initiatives that we do at Project South moving forward. Has a great deal to do with Brownsville liberation. So I can pass.
I'll take it back. I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you so much for that. And I'm sure we'll have some questions on that. And I see some questions in the chat already. Eric, let's go to you. Your work with Georgia West Farmers connects to the long tradition of cooperative economics. What do today's movements have to learn from this legacy of rural agricultural cooperatives? How do you see farming and food sovereignty as important ingredients in our work for liberation? And how can we build systems that prioritize community well-being over profit?
Absolutely. And yes, and we're West Georgia Farmers Cooperative. And of course, food is really what we primarily do. That was we're what you call an agricultural slash producer cooperative, and obviously food is fundamental. I mean, without food, if we don't feed ourselves, we don't live. And we felt, the founders of this co-op in 1966, when they got together, 7 founders and 80 farmers and their families got together and decided they wanted to take control of the ownership of their food systems and try to aggregate so that they can be large enough to be competitive and to build sustaining food enterprises that would improve their collective wealth and their individual farm wealth as well, because the challenge was keeping the land and being able to pass down generational wealth through the farms and the land. And so today we still adhere to that model and that vision. And of course, we've expanded it somewhat, but it's important because we understand that we just can't just go out here in one fell swoop and take control of of all areas of our life right now, single as one co-op. So our lane is food. And we're small farmers. We grow, we feel, the best, clean, sustainably, environmentally sustainable food that we can share and sell to the people that we're closest to. Of course, so hyper local is what we pioneer and what we offer to the marketplace. And through food, we can build. We can not only build those food systems, which we have done and which we're expanding, but we can take ownership of those food systems and use the largesse of those profits to build other economic and cooperative economic enterprises like we've done in the past and like we're doing now. We purchased just in the last 3 years, we purchased 2 new properties. We've got some housing under contract right now that we just purchased because we purchased about 2 acres to build this model that we call a co-op-plex that will be a grocery store. We just got approved for phase 2 of our credit union. So we're moving forward on that. And so, yes, by taking control of your food, that's fundamental. I think it may have been the Panthers or one of our iconic Black leaders or leader groups stated that once you can feed your people, you can build a nation. You grow the food, you can build a nation. And so we're just trying to take ownership of the geography, the economic, political geography in West Central Georgia and the food systems so that if another COVID happens, we'll be well prepared, which we were prepared before. And so, yeah, we just feel like food is fundamental. And I think most people probably agree.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and I love you've got that same structure of your building, right? You're starting with the food and land, but you're building, onto that and creating that infrastructure. Thank you. And next we've got Allison. So housing justice, another one that's critical. Food and housing, right, are two staples. Critical issue in Atlanta and beyond. How does your work with the Housing Justice League reflect the legacy of folks fighting for land and housing justice, as well as working to build the cooperative approaches to land and ensure everybody has access to housing, stewardship of land? What lessons can we learn from the past struggles for and the successful alternatives to housing and land that you've been working with?
Thank you. Just want to make sure you can hear me. Mic check. Okay, great. Yeah, so I'm Allison and I work with Housing Justice League. I am born and raised here in Atlanta, but uniquely, both of my parents are up from rural Georgia from generations back. But my maternal side of the family came up and settled in the community of Summerhill. So there's a real racial history pattern here in Atlanta in terms of how housing has to this day has a real deep impact on who has access to housing and where you live, not just geographically, but also how communities are created. Um, and so I think for me and for the folks that we work with within community, one of the most important things is that this has been a struggle. It is going to continue to be a struggle until we all understand that housing has to be a human right. We have from some of our best practices is from my own history of being displaced in the city, whether it was through infrastructure development projects or the broken promises of model cities or urban renewals, all of these distinguished names that really all ultimately have desperate impacts on generations. And so I think for me, what was most important is to see the 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 women in the struggle and how they took on that struggle in terms of housing. That created a whole movement that was an incubation to other economic opportunities for us. So and I go back and I think and tying the lineage to Brownsville was ultimately where my family settled and the people what's now considered to be the People's Town community. But understanding and being in the spaces with really strong women leaders like Eltha Mae Matthews, that created the welfare rights movement. And in that movement, there were so many other things that were just as critical to building a platform so that people will have equitable access to housing. And so I think one thing that we are really trying to fight today is really those policies that were written, not just those redlining policies that these people who are renting land. How do we take back our land? And what do we want to do with it? Creating these models of how we house people, where are we housing people, and thinking of different ways to do that. And not just this the central way of building a warehouse and placing people in it, but making sure that that housing that we create is inextricably linked with opportunities. And so we're trying to build that. We've been able to create some land trusts under our belt. And in those land trusts, we want to make sure that people understand what stewardship means because we're borrowing that language. So we've got to be able to make sure, people understand and have a knowledge of what stewardship is and what it means to be what collective organizing means to create and build and continue to have land trust. So for us, this struggle, it's not going to end tomorrow, although I wish it would, but it's not going to end tomorrow. The important thing for us is to really, really come together and continue to work in collections, but not as ownership because we don't own this land. We're simply here for a time, and it is up to us to be great stewards of this land, so we pass it on.
Thank you so much. I think that notion of stewardship is so important because sometimes we get so hung up with who owns it or who doesn't own it, and what we really need is that right? It needs to be here for the long run. Those 7 generations that sometimes people talk about, making sure we're here, for that. That's also why I keep coming back to this notion of we also need to find joy in all this work because it's a long-term project. We might have small victories, but we've got to keep it going. And if we don't find joy, some level of joy, we're not going to be able to make it. So now I've got a question for each of you to answer. And you can also talk back and forth at this point if you'd like. So looking at Atlanta's history, what do you see as the most important principles for building solidarity and sustaining movements? How can we ensure these principles guide us as we work to end capitalism and create a more just and equitable world? And I'll start with Allison, I think, and then you can pass it on.
Sure.
Um,
So I want to just name, particularly in Atlanta, it's important for us to name that there's harm. And there's harm that is continuing to be perpetuated by horrible policies. And until we are able to acknowledge the harm that's there, and it still exists within communities, particularly for those who have not had opportunities to have reparations, we are going to be in a space where we're constantly fighting without you know, we're constantly fighting without the opportunity to gain any access or have positive outcomes. I think what is going to be important for solidarity is for each of us to understand the walk in which we've come and where do we want to go? And how do we use that? How do we take each one's experience and not pit them against each other, but how do we take those experiences and build each other's communities up to a space where there is equitability, there is equal access, there is opportunity, but also understanding that we are rooted in this work because we care and love, and we understand what a beloved community is. I think with the current way, particularly the Atlanta way, has not been a model of how we create a beloved community. There's always a lot of lip service that has been given to people here in Atlanta about what Atlanta stands for, what Atlanta means. But until we make them do what they are supposed to do by the people and for the people, then there's going to be a constant struggle. But we shouldn't be struggling with each other when it comes to solidarity. We can't do that. We're not going to move forward. My understanding of family is bringing it all to the table. It's not to call people out, but bring people to the table so we break bread with the understanding that this is a communion, that we're here to serve everybody. And then everybody gets served in that way. So I just think there has to be an understanding of the irreparable harm that's been done on people that are in communities and people from all walks of life. We got to share. We have to share in that harm. And how do we break out of that cycle of harm?
I'll defer to my other Atlanta person. I'm not really from Atlanta, but interesting enough, I do housing work in Atlanta. So go right ahead.
Okay, we'll get back to you because you can still answer. It doesn't have to be specifically Atlanta, but let Ayinde first. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, reconciliation is critical. Being able to reconcile our differences, but also our position to colonialism and imperialism. And so as we have built things, as we continue to resist, since we got here, but in particular in Atlanta, I can say that a lot of efforts have we talk out of both sides of our mouths, and so we need to reconcile that, and being able to really just recognize right now, I think, recognize what harm has been done, from where does the harm come, and also identifying or recognizing, who's bringing this, like who is actually the person bringing this problem to us, so that we can skip over this. It seems like a pattern here of fighting each other, in an effort to stop feeling the pain that is inflicted on us by imperialism, by capitalism. It comes down to hyperlocal. So then we start talking about the municipal powers, and just so folks can understand, those of you who all are not from Atlanta, but Atlanta adjacent even. I am, for context, right? So from where I speak, I have four mothers, 4 generations of mothers buried in the cemeteries in Atlanta proper. All right. So my folks go back, right? I'll name cemeteries. I don't do high schools, right? So cause that's a whole thing, right? People say, oh, well, what high school, what hospital were you born in? Well, my great grandmother was actually born in a house on Old Wheat Street, right? So I can't play that game. So just for context, so what has happened is that Atlanta is so transient. My bandwidth is low. I'm gonna cut my camera off.
Thanks.
The Atlanta is so transient that people, well, let me do it this way. Imperialists or colonialists, they get to take advantage of newcomers consistently. So then people don't know what the lay of the land is. And so then what ends up happening is those individuals who've been around for some time, they either get elevated closer to whiteness, right? And the colonial structure, whether they want to or not. But, that's kind of irrelevant, because what happens is harm is done. And so then you have these new people come in, and they're willing to do jobs, they're willing to take everything that, that other folks were at some point saying, hey, we're not going to take $1. I'll give you the example of the washerwomen strike in 1881. We're not going to take $1 a month to do the job, right? The washerwomen had been here for some time. So they're saying, hey, now we're going to do this for $8. We're going to do this for $2 now a month. Right. So, economically, that's incredible, right? You want 100% of what you were getting before. That's absolutely insane. Like the audacity, the average age, by the way, of the women that were leading that strike. These women are like think about these women are freshly out of enslavement, right? These women are like 16 years old, right? I don't know if anybody's seen any pictures of it, but again, I digress. But yeah, so you're talking about just a system that is consistently perpetuated inside of the Atlanta community, because people are coming in and they're going out. They come in, they go out. And we create systems to support that, right? So Atlanta, the HBCUs, what is it designed to do? It's designed to get people, here that are young folks. They're here for 4 years and then they go home or they go somewhere else, or they get elevated to work for Atlanta Public Schools, or they're going to, be a part of the city. While the people who have been here, they're not getting those jobs. They're not getting those opportunities. So there are some complexities, but we're going to need to contend with and reconcile some of the historical harm that has been done to families and communities by extension throughout Atlanta.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm hearing, and I'm going to get to you in a second, Eric, but I'm going to try to prime you a little bit more. I'm hearing, principles of solidarity. We need reconciliation because they are trying to divide and conquer us. We have to remember that we can't be divided and conquered. So we need to reconcile whatever the traumas and the differences are. We need to remember our solidarity. I also am hearing we need some constant political education, right? Because the players keep changing. There's new and different people. So we need to keep reminding ourselves of what the realities are, keep learning together, that kind of thing. And then, of course, we heard about caring, taking care of each other, helping each other, stewarding the resources we have so that they last. And these obviously, clearly, these are somewhat peculiar to Atlanta, but not really. And so, Eric, I'll bring you in because I think the principles that you kind of laid out for us already in terms of food sovereignty and, you know, uh, building building services and programs and businesses based on needs and meeting needs and that kind of thing are some of the principles you could add here. But I think also what has kept you all going, and yeah, just talk about some of the principles that have guided your work and how your co-op has continued to move in the world.
Absolutely, absolutely. The thing that has kept us going is that commitment um, to the vision, the mission of the old work, because that, you know, a lot of people now that are newcomers to co-ops, they really don't have many old living models to look at. I was fortunate enough that there was one in my backyard that I was introduced to by an old colleague of yours who's probably no longer with us. You probably remember the late great Ralph Page.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
yes, yes, he was my neighbor, my mentor. No, he actually lived in the same community of LaGrange with me. So as I was starting out my journey as being a small farmer, I went to Mr. Page looking to get a job with the Federation, and he pointed me to West Georgia Farmers Co-op. And so this is it's not anything to romanticize. It is real work with real people that bring real baggage. We've got generational trauma that shows up in a lot of ways. And when you put those in a group dynamic of over 10 people, but really the more people, it's a challenge, you know, to trying to meet the mission, because we're all trying to what's the term, debrief ourselves from the addiction of the capitalist mentality, the individualist capitalist mentality. And when you're trying to do that work with a bunch of people, and where there's money involved and power and control and egos, it's a challenge. But if you are on code with, you know, of course, empowering our communities and our people, and really building these institutionals that are going to last another 50 to 60 years, if you're aligned with those people, there's really not anything that you can't do. And of course, in our example, we feel has been a testament to that, because like I said, we started to breathe new life into this co-op maybe about 12, 13 years ago when I joined, because the co-op was dormant. You know, that old generation had pretty much gotten old and couldn't do the things that they once were able to do. And if nobody else is stepping up across generations, you will lose some of those old co-ops, which has happened historically. And so, but you want to always look toward the future. What motivates us to make these institutions successful is so they can survive generations. And of course, and you know, we were blessed to inherit a co-op that at least had a structure, that at least was still alive as far as registered with the state, that had free and clear deeds. So we weren't at risk of losing grandmother's house, you know, so to speak. And we were just able to, and now we'll hopefully be able to pass it on to the next generation with enterprises that are thriving and profitable, and which makes the work of, you know, a little bit easier. You know, we talk all the time as far as generational wealth, how each generation has to start over with nothing, because for the most part, you know, we've had generational wealth taken from us and stolen from us in many cases. And we just magnify that on a collective level. You know, we haven't had wealth, we haven't had community wealth because of, you know, different things such as the Highway Act of, what was it, 1950, redlining, some of these various systemic racial practices that has harmed us, overall as a community. They made it impossible for us to aggregate. So our example is one of ethno aggregation for the most part, and we really want to push that model. So, and I just want to say one more thing, is that my two colleagues were talking about housing. Even though I do my cooperative work, food work outside of Atlanta, but I actually do housing work in Atlanta. My profession is I'm a housing counselor, so I know firsthand the housing issues that are being faced in Atlanta, because I tackle them Monday through Friday every day by helping people, find, locate affordable housing solutions. And it's becoming it is an epidemic. It is an epidemic in Atlanta. So, and I'll land there.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's all connected. So I have some more principles I got from your presentation. Actually, everybody talked about commitment, but you named it. We need commitment and dedication. I love that term. We need to debrief from the addiction of to capitalism. I'm going to use that one. I hope you don't mind if I steal that one.
Not at all. I've stolen enough of your quotes over the last few years. So.
Perfect. That's what we're supposed to be doing. Also that collective wealth building, right, is also a principle, right? We're doing this. We want collective wealth that we can also pass on. And the notion of intergenerational transfer, I love that's so important also that you brought up. This has to be intergenerational, right? We've got to keep thinking about succession. I know we keep saying about the future, but you named also the intergenerational transfer. And then I think I heard you say thriving, because often we don't we don't use that term. We usually just talk about surviving and this, but I think another principle is that we want everybody to be thriving. And so we're trying to get to a point where we're all thriving. So thank you for that. I have one last question, I believe, and then somebody else is going to help us go through the questions in the chat. So again, this is for everybody, and I guess this time we could start with Eric. As we look ahead to the Resist and Build Summit, that's May 2nd through 5th. I think someone asked about that in the chat. So May 2 to May 5 in Atlanta. So as we look ahead to that, how do you three want participants to think about participating in this event at this historic moment in Atlanta? How can we ensure that the lessons of Atlanta's history, or the history of collective action among Black folks and solidarity, can inspire us to do more as we work to dismantle the oppressive systems and build humane, solidaristic alternatives and debrief from our addiction to capitalism? So I don't know, Eric, if you have anything more to add, but what do you think participants should be thinking about in terms of how they participate in the Resist and Build Summit?
Yeah, and I'll be brief and quick. Basically, I would want people to come to this conference summit looking to get involved. At minimum, join one of these co-ops, because there's enough work in Atlanta, pretty much in every community. There's enough work to be done. So come to get educated, because like I said, the principle number 5 is real. We can't really undervalue principle number 5 when it comes to these cooperative economics principles, because like I said, we are trying to relearn how to participate in an economy, which I learned from you, Dr. Jessica, is a social endeavor. And I'm a social worker, and I learned that economics is a social endeavor. It's always stuck in business courses somewhere, but it is a social endeavor. And of course, and like I said, come and connect with someone, whether it's our co-op, Miss Johnson's team, Ayende's team, Gangsters to Growers, whoever, GCDC, connect with someone, look to connect with someone. So that's what I hope will be the action steps and the takeaway.
Great, thank you. Ayinde.
All right. Yeah. So I think being able to I'm just lead off of the tail of that. There's definitely getting involved with somebody and doing something. And this may not be popular, but doing something at this point has to be more than reading. And I'm saying that because the person who spoke before me works with our tradition, right? African people were brought here to Americas because of our relationship with nature and science, quite specifically chemistry, right? I'm not going to go any further into that. However, there's quite a bit of chemistry that is required. And when I say chemistry, I don't mean book knowledge. I'm talking about knowing, which is completely different from knowledge. You have to have a practice. The reason why you always went to your big mama's house to eat your big mama's food. Now, big mama, let me contextualize that, because a lot of y'all don't necessarily know. Big mama does not mean your grandmother. Big mama is a title. Everybody's grandmother wasn't the big mama, right? So there was a mother inside your family that everybody they went to, but she was in your family, but maybe not just again your mother or your mother's mother directly. But the reason why you ate her collard greens and not somebody else's collard greens is because of the chemistry that she knew that was in her body. She knew how to measure just as much right amount, right? If you weren't feeling good and she knew about it, man, them pot of greens would miraculously heal you. But every time, so like that's science, or is that luck? And it can't be. So again, I would strongly encourage people to start getting in relationship with a lot of these organizations that are actively doing something. And just to speak to the addiction of capitalism, I want people to academically sit with that, but only for a second before you do something about it. What upends the concept of capitalism? It is an idea first, right? It's belief. Once people stop investing time in passing money around, or whether you do it on your computer or on your phone, and that defining what value is, and our character becomes that which defines value, and our effort. So if I say I'm gonna show up at Brother Eric's farm, then I'm gonna show up at Brother Eric's farm. If I say I'm gonna plant this row, or I'm gonna till this yard, or I'm gonna do whatever this is, I'm going to go and do that. In closing, I would say we never question the ethics of any Big Mama. You ain't never heard a Big Mama in all of history be a person with low character. You ain't never heard the story start off with somebody, Big Mama, being like, yeah, can't depend on Big Mama. She ain't gonna, she don't do what she say she gonna do every time. That is currency. That's real. That capital, it is what we believe in. And unfortunately, I love the language of it's our addiction. We choose to participate in that.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Allison.
Yeah, powerful, Ayinde. Thank you. So yeah, in the words of our good brothers here in Atlanta from Goody Mob, you got to get up and get out and get something. So that means we got to get up and do something. As in the words of our good brother Andre 3000, the South got something to say. Always has had something to say. But now it's time for us not to just say it and not just talk about it. It's time for us to all be about it. Another thing that I would say we'd like to add to this conversation is that we have got to start right now, tomorrow, or yesterday, to resist the populist ideology right now, because we can't wait another 10 years for housing to be a human right. That's just not going to happen. We can't accept it. We can't live with it. And we've got to be able to get up and go out and do something about it. And the last thing that I'll say is, what can people do? Is people need to go to these meeting spaces. You need to resist with community. We work in communities where people are earning some of the lowest wage, but paying some of the highest rents in the city of Atlanta. That is crazy. So when we are out resisting, we need you. We need you, because it's not just our issue, it's everybody's issues. If I can't live well, then you ain't gonna be able to live well, because I want to make sure that my family has somewhere to go. And that means that I'm gonna do whatever it takes to make it happen. So in closing, again, resist with us, stand out with us, and speak out with us.
Thank you so much. So again, what I've heard is get involved, do something, be active, but not just anything, right? Resist, invest time in dismantling capitalism, invest time in joining the groups that are already doing important things, make connections, learn about what's happening, get educated. But it's not good enough just to know something. It's not good enough just to have knowledge. You've got to know something, right? Be knowing and apply the knowledge. I heard recognize that the South has something to say, but we got to do something about it, right? We don't just talk about it. And don't wait to do something to resist. Don't wait to be involved. To get in as soon as you can, as well as you can. The conference, I think, is one place to help figure out how to get involved and learn about who's doing what. I just saw somewhere in the chat, somebody put a list of all the different co-ops and stuff in Atlanta. So there's that. You can find out even before you go to the conference, some of that. So I think, again, it's a place for us to make sure we're doing that collective organizing, thinking, resisting in order to do the collective building. And so now I think, is it Georgia, hand it back to you? You'll handle the rest of the Q&A?
Yeah, yes. Thank you. Thank you. So we're not in person, so make sure y'all throw some emojis, fires, claps, all those things in there. And I want to thank the panelists and also Dr. Jessica Gordon Nembhard. We have Ayinde Summers, Eric Simpson, and Allison Johnson. And right now we want to open it up for some of the questions and comments in the chat. Matthew and Sanaa will help us monitor those and bring those up. So if you have a question, please don't hesitate to submit that in the chat. And maybe even if you need to come off mute, we will probably open that up for people to come in and speak. So we'll spend about 20 minutes before we close for the audience to get to ask questions. So Matt and or Sanaa, go ahead. Matt or Sanaa, if y'all talking, y'all on mute. The first question.
So I'm wondering if do we want to encourage the folks who asked some of these questions to come off mute? Is Lelena with us? Had a great question from a perspective, speaking of a queer Boricua perspective.
Yeah, I'm here. Hi. I just feel really grateful for my dear David Ferris invited me, and I'm grateful because I really want to plug in and be creating some things, some alternatives. And moving here during the pandemic meant that I was moving in kind of isolation, I was moving from North Carolina at the time. And so I've been trying to find my queer Latino community, queer BIPOC communities that are organizing, and just curious both from I so appreciate the history that was shared, but any history around BIPOC people organizing together. It doesn't have to just be Latine, and anything going on right now that I could get involved in.
Can you say that again? I'm sorry. I missed a bit. I don't know what's going on with this internet.
Oh, yeah. I was just curious about the history of BIPOC people organizing across groups in Atlanta, not just Latine groups, but other groups. And if there's anything going on right now that is cooperative solidarity work that that I would be able to plug into.
Yeah, well, we have there's a cooperative between Housing Justice League, the Guild, and American Friends Service Committee in terms of the infrastructure of the community land trusts that we have. So we have, and we're trying to continue to build our organizations to for the land trust in order to direct it and support it and provide the resources and all that to it. Then there's another opportunity, particularly with BIPOC. There's Georgia Act, there's Housing Justice League, and there's Women on the Rise and Women on the Rise, and then there's Jobs with Justice, all led by women of color that have created this coalition to work not just in Atlanta, but throughout the region and state to lift the ban on rent control. So there's lots of opportunities there that are needed, whether it be work around our policy agenda, work around our legal and research spaces, and just outright organizing and talking and hosting and holding sessions and porch parties with folks. So there's plenty of ways to plug in to us, but that piece of BIPOC, and all of us are in different sectors of work. We got labor, healthcare, maternity care, all working together to build this coalition around lifting the ban on rent control.
Thank you. I missed one organization, Georgia Acts, Women on the Rise, Housing Justice League, and I think you named one more.
Jobs with Justice.
Thank you.
I'll just quickly, I don't have an answer for you about Atlanta, but I think you also asked about history, not just of BIPOC coalitions, but also LGBTQIA plus, and there's not a lot. My suspicion is that as hard as it was for me to find the examples of Black co-ops, it's probably even harder to find anything about LGBTQIA plus activity in the past because it was so dangerous. It was already dangerous enough even to organize co-ops for Black folks and for brown folks. I think it was even more dangerous to to self-identify with more things, and it was dangerous to do those cross coalitions, even Black and brown coalitions, because again, white supremacists and the capitalists don't want us coming together, right? It's in their interest to keep us apart. So I think, at least from the historical research I tried to do, it's really hard to find examples of that kind of thing because most of it had to be done so clandestinely, and people didn't really talk about it or pass it on. And that's a problem, trying to figure out how we get that information. I have been encouraging people to interview their elders and things like that and ask some of these hard questions, because if we don't get them to articulate it, right, we're not going to know. And of course, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's probably lost. In terms of just Black and brown coalitions in general, yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Young Lords, because they did actually work closely with the Black Panther Party and had very similar philosophies and programming. I know in New York City with Cooperative Home Care Associates, which is still the US's largest worker cooperative, that's actually was always a coalition of Black and brown women in home care coming together to raise the level of that industry and to make jobs better for Black and brown women in home care. So that's an example. I think there's a bunch of cleaning co-ops and some sewing factories that similarly have always involved Black and brown women. So that's probably the best I can answer that question, but I also am one of those people who keep telling everybody to, find people to do this research together, because there's so much more that we need to know that we don't know. And so, again, asking elders, trying to comb through library resources, find elders or people that you heard about who were involved in something and go see if their papers are somewhere and look through their papers. You can find a lot of information from autobiographies, from archives, things like that. And so the people who haven't, who are interested in doing that kind of excavation, I think we should be encouraging them to look for these different, to answer these questions that are arising now that we don't have answers to yet. Did anyone else want to answer that one? Otherwise, I think, Matthew, we can keep moving.
I was just going to lastly on her looking for resources for the LGBTQIA. Dr. Yolande Thomason in the Office of Human Development, or I'm not sure what her acronym stand for, but she's done a lot of work. She's probably your resource for looking for those organizations. Pecan Milk, those are just a couple that I know in the Atlanta area doing work in that community. So just want to plug that.
Thanks.
All right, Divinity, did you want to come up next?
Divine Rising, everyone. How are you all doing today? I want to say first, give thanks for this beautiful space. This is my first time hearing about a lot of these organizations, so I'm very grateful that I came across today's meeting and was able to attend. My name is Divinity Divine, and I'm the culture curator behind the Sankofa Healing Experience. Sankofa meaning to go back and retain what is of the past and bring to the present. We combine that with healing and recognizing that while we can do all the things and use all the tools to bridge the gap, we also need to focus the healing, which is filling the voids that the bridge is covering. And then we create experiences for our community in order to do that. So either it's our 3-day campouts, our Days of Sankofa Healing and Sankofa After Dark experiences, or our It Takes a Village program, which focuses on our youth and elders of the African diaspora. My question was just to the organizations, because as we are continuing our growth, we've been in Virginia for the last 5 years, and I am now relocating back home to Georgia, where I was born and raised, and just wanting to connect and collaborate with other organizations. I wanted to know, how do these three organizations, because a lot of you all spoke about reconciliation and thriving instead of surviving, and being able to overcome the harm that has not only been pushed upon us by other communities, but the harm that is within our own community, and also trust within our own community, and get into the space where we are trusting each other again in order to do the work that is needed to be done. We can't move forward unless we have the trust within our community again. How are these organizations bringing healing back into their spaces as well?
Well, I'll start. Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so for us, it would be really terrible if I myself is trying to facilitate or lead an organization, and I'm still dealing, in which, there are still spaces within me that still, not understanding harm and how to deal with that. But the one thing I can say that we have done over the last 2 years is really embed that into our work. Healing has been a part of us not just saying, okay, take a couple of days off, but really providing those resources, these unrestricted resources. If people are, needing spaces to, you know, whichever way they think about healing, it is totally up to them. So not just embedding it in our workspace, but also allowing people, if they want to discuss it and talk about it with other people, making sure that it is always a safe space there for them, and it just making sure that we have the resources dedicated as a line item and not an afterthought, that is truly built in to really, really turn around the harm that's been done. And then the other thing that we also do, there's a lot of political education that has to come with this. People come into this work because they are scarred and harmed for many different reasons. So trying to make sure that we're casting our net wider, to different resources to help with that, because it's not within our wheelhouse. I'm not going to pretend like it's in our wheelhouse, but making sure that there are resources that we can say, hey, this is a space that we recommend that you go and, give it and putting it and trust it in the hand. The other thing I'm going to end with, I think has been most important for us, is we come in authentic, we come in understanding, and we come in knowing that this is not going to be a transactional relationship. We are going to show up in community as our authentic selves, and we have to accept whatever community gives us back to work with. So those are some of the ways that we try to deal with the harm.
Yeah, that's great. Ayinde Summers here. Yeah, similarly, we also function the same way, community first. So yes, we're organizers, and some of us are from our communities in which we are organizing, and a lot of times we're not. But in terms of a practice, we lead with asking, questions about, what is it that you need? What do you, how can we support you? And I am gonna go to Geechee on this, and then shout it out. That's Septima Clark, in her organizing, her masterful organizing. And those of you all who don't know her numbers, just for context, she organized 54,000 teachers and taught 54,000 teachers. And then after doing that, they all were able to bring literacy to 5 million Black people in 5 years. Michael Jordan don't got them type of numbers. You know what I'm saying? 5 years? Are you like, I still have I've been saying that for at least about 10 years. It's still mind blowing. 5 million people in 5 years. Good grief. What she would do. I also teach literacy. And I'm a fan. I'm a big fan of what they were able to do with their citizenship schools. What she would do when someone will come is the first thing she would do is, what do you want to learn to do? What do you want to learn about? What do you want to learn about? Before she taught somebody how to read, this is the first question that she's asking. And if we're talking about, numbers in terms of organizing or numbers in terms of education, I mean, I dare you to find a teacher who does better numbers than that. Like, the success rate on that is incredible. Man, I would love to have any teacher to work with people. And then the age that she's working with, you're talking about, and I've seen her lesson plans go all the way from early childhood to adult. So something that is cathartic, something that allows us to reconcile, but definitely get in touch with our breath, being with nature. These are our practices that we do, wellness practices that we have at Project South. We have a Umoja garden where people can actually ground themselves. It's an organic garden. And actually get in touch with, quite literally, the nature of the space in Atlanta.
I should give thanks. I've been
Yeah.
a barefoot walker for 3 years, so I love to ground, and I'll definitely.
And we're about in Georgia.
Well, I'm nomadic, so I actually live on the ground, live on the earth. Right now, I do hospice work, so I come here 7 days a week. I'm in Riverdale right now, but I'm wherever I need to be, wherever the earth brings me. Yeah.
And I appreciate you ending that with Ayinde on the power of nature to heal. But how do we use cooperative economics to promote healing? We feel that cooperative economics itself is healing, because of course, and Dr. Jessica, I was telling y'all, just reminding you about Ralph Page. One thing that he wasn't able to do, I mean, this is a man that built co-ops all over the country and even across the waters in some cases, but he wasn't even able to build a co-op in his hometown, because that's just how somewhat toxic our social relationships were. And so we feel that cooperative economics is healing in and of itself, because the individualism of entrepreneurship that we all have been aspiring to, it creates a competitive spirit, and it kind of breeds that haterism that we often bemoan. And so we try to introduce cooperative economics, especially because it's something that a lot of people haven't been introduced to or exposed to. The cooperative economics itself, if practiced right, and if consistent and committed, expect to go through the bumps and bruises, the cooperative economics itself will be healing. So, I mean, of course, the closest thing we've got to cooperative economics in most of our communities, historically, institutionalized, has been the church. And of course, and the church is supposed to be a healing place. And so we kind of look at cooperative economics itself as healing. So that's my answer.
I love
Thank you
that.
for
Actually,
that.
great answers, everybody. Sorry, Divinity, go ahead.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say that I'm in agreement that cooperative economics is also building a new relationship with economics is very much a healing aspect. And so thank you so much for that.
Matthew, do we have any more?
Yeah, we do. I just wasn't sure if we had enough time, but I wanted to pose this one in the chat from JG. I don't know if you can come off mute or not, but yeah, the question is, I'm interested in how Atlanta-based organizations work together, what challenges there are around shared or different visions, and what are the struggles?
And I'll start it off. I'm not really an Atlanta-based organization, but I work with some of the Atlanta-based organizations. Several have started relationships and even joined our co-op in order to source food, of course, from Black farmers and larger Black farmers outside of the the capacity that urban farms can provide. And that just goes back to principle number 6, cooperation among cooperatives. So that's how we practice it. So, but I'll let my Atlanta colleagues talk specifically about what they do within the perimeter or beyond.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. I think it's important to understand that our issues or whatever challenges that we have are not just centered here in Atlanta, that we recognize that, we need all folks from all different areas of work in order for us to, in order for us to move the needle on our work. I think what's important is that when we are reaching out or we're working with another organization, it's important that we understand and respect and honor the values and principles of those organizations. I think it's also what has been helpful to us is that not every issue is, our issues are not going to be centered in everybody's fight. But if we're showing up in solidarity and supporting, we will make sure that we've created those long-term relationships so that we don't have to, one off each other or fight for the small resources or, those kinds of things. But it can be very challenging at times if you're not properly resourced, because those kind of that stuff will pit people against one another, and it just isn't good to build a real grassroots movement. So for us, it is just about being in relationship to those people who are sometimes indifferent, but if our values and principles are aligned, then we go straight forward. We work together. I don't see that the work that we do and the victories that we've had is not because we have been siloed in our communities or in our organization. It is because of the added capacity that people have given to strengthen any campaign that we've been able to win. So that's, I would recommend that, folks look at the other organizations. If it ain't the work that you're doing, that's cool. But if it aligns with your values and principles, connect and try to work together.
I'll only add, and continue to reconcile and work it out. Right? Like, we're going to have issues. We already have some. We come to the table with them. And let's just be willing to work them out with each other. And Atlanta, all roads lead to Atlanta. I mean, y'all might be thinking it's like, just a expression. But I mean, literally all roads lead to Atlanta. All the planes. But before that, it was all the trains. We have the 0 mile marker for all of the trains. It's downtown. It's up under a bridge right now. Actually a parking lot, Georgia State. And so we have to converge. We're gonna have conversations, and we just got to be willing to have those conversations, even when they're tough, but especially when they're tough. And just be more dedicated to working it out and working together than we are leaning into these divisive conversations.
Thank you all so much. This has been fantastic. Really appreciate it. I've learned a lot. I'm sure we could go on forever, but our time is just about up. So I will turn it back to Geechee. And thanks again, everybody. Thanks for letting me participate in this.
Well, thank you so much. And Jessica, you shared something really important in the chat. Another principle we've all been talking about is that the people most impacted must be heard and in charge, and be in charge through solidarity and cooperation. George Jackson also says that as organizers, we don't do for the people what they can do for themselves, but we join in them with the work. So I wanna say thank you again to all of y'all for showing up here today. This collective spirit has been beautiful towards our struggle and liberation. Deep love and gratitude to our sister, comrade, Dr. Jessica Gordon Nembhard, and for dropping those beautiful knowledge. Good. I'm always in awe when I'm speaking with you or in spaces that you're speaking. Shout out to the incredible panelists, Ayinde Summers, Eric Simpson, Allison Johnson, and thank you for your work here locally in Georgia and Atlanta, your analysis, and then for setting the tone for what's to come. I think today we all can agree that we've been reminded that Atlanta's history or Atlanta's story is a story that's connected to the larger protracted struggle of resistance, resilience, and rebuilding. And we know, and we have even shown the world that there's an alternative or another way that can be rooted in solidarity, care, and justice. And I've heard this a couple of times on the panel, but too often we get stuck in the critique mode. We get stuck into what we're against, and we just forget to do what we are for and actually build what we are for. And so I think that was represented here today. We have the same energy towards what we're critiquing with what we've built. As the young people say, keep that same energy. We need to do that when we build it. So when you hear resist and build, it's important that you know it's both. It's about building a world that's sustainable, one that we deserve, and showing up for each other, practicing solidarity in real, tangible ways, concrete ways, creating systems that honor all of our humanity. And that's why gatherings like this matter. That's why we are gathering in person when we come to Atlanta, because we know that we have to break bread together. We have to fellowship. We have to strategize, and it also shows us an example of the potential power that we can have when we come together, because it's going to take all of us to come together. So the Resist and Build Network is just about that, bringing a bunch of different organizations together and collectively creating a vibrant ecosystem that's transformation. We do this through study, ideological struggles, even as the brothers and sisters were saying, like, we're gonna disagree sometimes, but we got to get over that and move on. Building deep relationships and other actions that get us closer to liberation. So the Resist and Build Summit is in May 2025, and we're taking the work to the next level. So we'll love to see y'all down here and get involved in what's happening. That's May the 2nd through 5th, 2025. We need you there. It's important for us to, again, strategize and literally build the world as necessary. I think sometimes we tend to think we're going to be here forever, but when this world get tired of us, this earth is going to kick us up out of here because we're not treating it right. So if you haven't already, make sure you check out the summit website. The link will be in the chat. We'll send it out again after this. Come through, bring your peoples, your grandmama and them, your cousin, whoever, even your people who you don't like, bring them. I didn't say Big Mama because she's going to be already there. She probably told y'all to come in the first place. So we could create this powerful moment. And I also want to leave with a quote. Have y'all, I'm sure everybody heard Emil Cabral, but it goes, people aren't fighting for ideas, for things in anyone's head. They're fighting to win material benefits, to live better and in peace, to see their lives go forward, to guarantee the future of their children. We point out concrete things, hide nothing from the masses of our people, tell no lies, expose lies whenever they are told, capitalism. Make no difficulties, mask no difficulties, mistakes, or failures, claim no easy victories. So again, the link is in the chat, and we will see y'all at the summit. Thank y'all again.
Peace.
Ashe, give thanks today.
Ashe, peace.
Peace and power.
Thank you so much.